Mr. and Mrs. Johansson were huddled together on a couch in the far corner of the waiting room. They sprang to their feet as I entered the waiting room. Mrs. Johansson wrapped both hands around her husband's left arm and leaned against him. She kept staring at the bloodstains on my pants. I introduced myself and then told them that although Kenny had lost a lot of blood, his vital signs had improved and he seemed stable. "We're just about to take him to the operating room," I said. Before I could say more, the door to the waiting room burst open and a young man rushed in. "Dad," he said, "I found it." "This is my son, Eric," Mr. Johansson said. "He went back to the farm to look for the missing piece of Kenny's leg." Eric reached into the pocket of his jacket. He handed me a clean white handkerchief in which he had wrapped a dirty 3-inch section of tibia. I doubted we could use it, but I wanted the boy to feel he had done something worthwhile. "Thanks, Eric," I said. "This could be a big help." "Will you be able to save Kenny's leg?" Mr. Johansson asked. At that moment, I was more worried about saving Kenny's life. The boy was in shock and had almost bled to death. I longed to reassure his parents, but I had learned not to make promises. "Mr. Johansson," I said, "we're going to do everything we can." "Please, Doc, please." I nodded, shook his hand, squeezed Mrs. Johansson's shoulder, and sprinted up to the OR. They had taken Kenny to OR 10, the largest of the operating rooms. In contrast to the ER, where everyone had been barking orders, shouting for equipment, and rushing back and forth, the operating room was quiet, almost hushed. Voices were muffled. There was a greater sense of control here. We were surgeons. This was our turf. Against the far wall, the laminar flow machine hummed faintly. The cardiac monitor issued its staccato, reassuring beeps. 2 anesthesiologists were wedged shoulder to shoulder at the head of the table. They had just finished the intubation. The scrub nurse stood at the back table, carefully arranging her instruments. 2 circulating nurses shuttled back and forth with instrument trays from the sterilizer. In the corner, a radiology tech waited patiently next to her portable X-ray machine. I handed the piece of tibia to the circulating nurse and asked her to sterilize it. Then I scrubbed my hands and joined the 5 other residents from various surgical specialties who were clustered around the shattered leg. The extent of the boy's injuries was now apparent. Large sections of muscle, skin, and bone were missing. Parts of nerves and arteries had been torn away. Dirt, manure, and fertilizer contaminated everything. First one, then another of the residents poked at the wound, winced or shook his head, then stepped back. No one was sure what to do. Should we try to save this leg, or should we amputate it? They all looked at me. I was the chief resident in orthopedic surgery. I was the one who had to decide.